Welcome to another episode of Talks with Tech Leaders. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Ryan. Thank you for joining me today. Would you mind just giving a bit of an intro to yourself?
Of course, yeah. I'm Ryan. I'm CTO at a company called Marra, who are a power platform consultancy. I'm based in Gateshead, and I've been in the software development industry for, I think, about 15 years now, maybe slightly more.
Brilliant. When did you start off in tech? Was it from a young age? Were you in school, university? What sort of path did you take to get into technology?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I know normally a lot of people that are in tech, they've been in it since they were extremely young. They started dabbling with their home computers. I actually got into it a little bit later, so didn't do any programming or software development when I was a kid. My first degree was in maths, so I didn't touch like any coding languages or anything like that in my first degree. And then what happened was that I was living in, I guess it was still kind of a student house, even though I wasn't a student anymore. And one of the people I was living with, they started doing a master's in computing science, but it was like a conversion course. So it was for people that they had a degree, but their first degree wasn't in computing science. So it's kind of like 3 years compacted into 1 year, so quite intensive. And he was telling me all about it. It just sounded so interesting to me. Some of the things that he was talking about just seemed to click naturally for me. And he was talking about this, didn't know what one was at the time, an IDE called BlueJ for Java. He showed me this thing, and so interested in it that I just decided to download the thing like in my own time and started playing and tinkering. And it was just so much fun. I actually ended up signing up to the exact same master's course. Oh. What had happened at that time is I was working like a bunch of kind of admin roles. Nothing was really sticking for me. I wasn't really... The degree that I had in maths was really great and really fit with my sort of logical way of thinking, but I couldn't find something that really landed the mathematical skills in a career. So yeah, the master's degree in computing science just, again, really clicked with the way that I think about things. Got that degree and then got a job for Scott Logic, a software consultancy in Newcastle, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Because I have seen a lot of people with maths degrees that get into software development. So I know this might sound quite similar, but is there a link there, or is there methods used within that if you've got solid ground in mathematics, then that you can take that to coding?
Yeah, I think the sort of abstracted ways of thinking in mathematics, that's what's useful. So there's no particular module that I did that like I use on a day-to-day basis, but just the way of thinking that there's often when you're doing development with code, there's quite a concrete like end result that you need to get to, and that's kind of the same thing like in maths, in mathematics. So yeah, I'd say that it's the style of thinking more than any particular like skill that I picked up.
Yeah. Where would you be if you hadn't met your housemate and he showed you that?
Well, who knows? I could still be leaping from admin job to admin job. So who knows?
Yeah. Oh, great. So you started off at Scott Logic. Was it a graduate scheme or something similar to get your first experience underneath you?
Yeah. So it was their graduate developer program that I joined. Because I had my first degree and then a pause while I guess you call it the floundering years, jumped from admin role to admin role. I was slightly older than the other grads that I joined, which was an interesting experience, a good experience. So yeah, the graduate program with Scott Logic is where I started. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you get thrown into the deep end quite quickly, or was there a bit of a gearing up period where they showed you a little bit, trained you? How was that? Because as you mentioned, they're a consultancy, so I can appreciate there's a lot of projects they're working on, a lot of work that they've got. So how was that initial period for you? Again, not coming from developing from a young age. It's still,
Yeah.
you've done the theory, you've probably made some projects at university, but
Yeah.
what was those early months like at Scott Logic for you?
Really, really difficult. It was, for me, it felt like it was in at the deep end. A huge amount of imposter syndrome. I mean, everyone in tech always talks about imposter syndrome. I think almost everyone has a slight issue with it. But yeah, being surrounded, but that's what I was referring to when I said it was interesting. Like, I kind of felt I was slightly older, I felt a little bit behind. Some people that I was on this grad program with, they'd been doing it since they were a kid, so I felt like I was constantly having to play catch up. In the early days, I'd be stopping until something like 7 p.m, 8 p.m. some nights. It felt like I was just banging my head against a brick wall. Other people just seemed to get certain things. I wouldn't recommend doing that, by the way. Staying till 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. has its downsides as well. But I do think that for somebody in my position, I did need to put in that grind early on, to make sure that I kept up to speed. And I think this connects with something that we might talk about later on, which is how to learn and how to upskill. I think you've got to do it by doing, not by just sitting and reading documentation and theories on how to do these things. I think that something that Scott Logic did incredibly well is that they put us on projects from the get-go. It wasn't like sitting in training all day long. It was, here's something you have to build as part of a team, go and do it.
Yeah. And was there a lot of support there as well? And
Yeah, there was, they kind of pair us up with mentors, make sure that we were sat with the senior developers and things like that. So it's not thrown in at the deep end without the armbands. It was popping the armbands on and then chucking us in.
Yeah. Was there any moments then in your early time there at Scott Logic where, sometimes things start to click, or you kind of think, okay, well, actually, I can do this? Was there any moment, any particular time working on a project or working with a team that you kind of felt like, actually, I'm doing all right here, I'm comfortable?
Yeah. I guess my earliest memory of that type of thing was where we were talking about the quality of one of the products that we were developing, and I suddenly realized in this room, in this meeting, that I had the most to say on the topic. And up until that point, I had felt like I had things to say, but maybe I wouldn't get listened to. Maybe other people in the room knew better than me. But there was this moment where I distinctly remember it. I knew all about the test pyramid, unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, and not to get into the detail of it, but that we were focusing too much on the end-to-end tests, which was making our testing strategy brittle. And just having all of these things to say and seeing some of the seniors in the room kind of nodding and agreeing, and I was like, oh, okay, these people are going to listen to me, this is great. So yeah, I think that's really, really important in tech leadership is now as a leader, I try to mirror that. I try to give people the space to have a voice. And when they're saying something, even if it seems obvious to me, but they're saying something, it's give them the encouragement, make sure you give them the eye contact, the enthusiasm.
Yeah. And then from Scott Logic, you moved to a product-based company. Is that right? Or was there a few steps before you got there?
Yeah, I mean, actually, interestingly, I started in product at Scott Logic. So Scott Logic is a consultancy, but they had a couple of products. One was called VisiBlocks, I think it was, for web, which was a data visualization library for web, and they wanted to create the same thing for iPhones. So me and a few other grads and a tech lead were put onto this project. It was called Shinobi Controls. So yeah, we were developing this developer tool that was a product. So it's like a product arm of a consultancy, and I did that for 5 years. And it was super interesting because what we were doing wasn't kind of the normal developer experience for people within Scott Logic. You had to be a little bit more, your eyes on the long term a little bit more. Not saying that consultants don't do that, but consultants, because of the way that contracts are set up, you do, in principle, have your eyes set on a near-term goal. So yeah, it was interesting being part of a group that thought slightly differently about things. But then after those initial 5 years, moved into consultancy, which kind of really shaped me into a generalist, because you could be put on any kind of project with any kind of technology. I remember having spent 5 years on iPhone, so it was Objective-C and then Swift. Then moving into consultancy, I was suddenly thrown into HTML, JavaScript, React. I had to upskill in that very quickly. I think I basically had 2 weeks before I went onto a project. And that was kind of the experience from then on. The number of different technologies where I would have a week or two to upskill in was considerable. And I think that really helped me to form ways of spotting like patterns, like within technologies that you can then go and apply to other patterns. It really accelerates your ability to learn new things and extrapolate ideas from one area to another, which is a really interesting part of working in consultancy. But yeah, what happened with consultancy versus product later on? Well, I was at Scott Logic for, I'd say, 6 years in consultancy, and then I had a brief stint at another consultancy, and then went to become head of engineering in a company called Grey CTO for, I think, nearly 2 years, and that was product. That was a SaaS company. So a very different experience there.
Yeah. And yeah, it's great because, like you said, you worked inside product within a consultancy, so you were used to working in that environment. Mm-hmm. Then you've worked as a consultant, and then you've got a variety of skills that you've picked up as well. Mm-hmm. So I think there's that adaptability part to it, where some developers can be stuck on a project for a long time.
Yes.
And then they think, well, yeah, maybe it's time to move on.
Yeah.
Maybe do something interesting. So it was weird because you've kind of got that taste within the same company, whereas typically somebody would maybe move from one to another. When you then went to work at a product-based company, I guess then you've already got those skills and experiences. So
right.
Did that make that transition a bit maybe easier, or maybe something you were used to when doing that?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit easier. So I talked before a little bit about kind of product thinking and kind of having your eyes on the end goal, like the maintainability of the thing. Not just that though, kind of long-term iteration, like on an idea as well. How do you get user feedback, and how do you decide what feedback to take account of and what feedback to ignore? Because you can't please everybody, which is another thing. So yeah, I had some of those ways of thinking when I went into Grid Smarter Cities. Having spent 6 years doing consultancy though, the flip side of that was that I found that going into that type of company, it's interesting in that I felt like I had a sort of consultant sheen to me. That the people working in a product company, they can be a little bit scrappier. And just kind of tell it how it is to each other sometimes. But when you're working as a consultant, you tell it how it is, but you form this very professional way of doing that. So that was an interesting change as well to go through. To be honest with you, I love it when people just tell it how it is.
Yeah, yeah. And were you, with you getting into a leadership position, did that start at Scott Logic when you were working with other team members and then progressed to head of engineering? And could you tell us a little bit about that journey? Did you fall into management or fall into mentorship, leadership, or was it something that you'd wanted and aspired to? Yeah.
It's a great question. I'd say that it just naturally happened over time. I think that with my career, I've never had a particular long-term goal in mind. I think I've always more been of the mindset of take the opportunities that appear and that seem interesting. But it's like iterating over like short-term opportunities rather than having some kind of long-term goal. So yeah, the way that panned out with like leadership and management is that when I moved to being a senior developer, I started doing some of the tech leadership on the Shinobi Controls project. So that was in my first 5 years. Within 5 years, I'd become a senior, and that was a small team on the iPhone side of things, I think there was maybe about 4 or 5 of us. There was a tech lead that sat across Android and like iPhone. So that was a really great experience for me, because it meant that I was getting the ability to experience doing some tech leadership whilst there was somebody to learn from and mentor me as well. So I didn't feel alone. That was really great. And also the people that were working on it with me, they were just so great as well. It always felt more like collaboration than tech leadership in that initial taster of leadership, which really helped me feel comfortable as well, especially with that sense of imposter syndrome. And then beyond that, once I moved into the consultancy arm, I got the opportunity to lead some very small projects, so 2 or 3 people, which really helps you to slowly build up that tech leadership muscle without being responsible for too much at once. I did run into a kind of trial by fire type situation soon after that, though, which was a consultancy project that we had for a retail bank, where I went in to start the discovery just by myself. Then once we moved out of discovery, we ramped up to there being 3 developers, which then went to 6 developers, then went up to 12 developers, and that happened over quite a short period of time. And that was an intense experience. I guess one of the things that helped me with that was the smaller experiences that I'd had earlier on. That was really useful. I already had some mental models around how to do this. I think the thing that helped me scale from 1 to 12 in that situation was having had the chance to put in place a lot of good processes, like both manual and automated, which really helped to scale like from 1 to 12. Thinking through, and there's a real tension here, it's thinking through what is the defined process that you and everybody else has to follow, whilst making sure that the space within that people can contribute and bring their own ideas, and there's kind of room for flex in it as well. And really understanding what the backbone of that process and your automated processes are, and trying to funnel people through that. But when you funnel people through that, trying to make sure that it doesn't feel like they're being controlled or hampered. And if they do feel that way, making sure that they've got the airtime to express it, take on board the ideas on how you can change like that agreed way of working together. I suppose there's a difference there between you have your way of working and you're going to impose it on everybody, versus how do you get everybody to communicate to make sure that we all continue to agree on our shared way of working. And I think that accidentally fell into doing that in that 1 to 12, and then I've tried to kind of model that ever since.
Yeah. And we were talking most recently in your current role at Marra as a CTO, you've delegated a lot more. So you've
that's right.
So you've maybe got less reports. So how did you find that? And I guess how are you finding that compared to having multiple reports in previous businesses? Yeah,
that again, really interesting transition, and early on actually quite difficult a transition. I don't want to pretend that all of this stuff has been smooth sailing. Absolutely not. The biggest difficulty with that transition was, I guess, it's moving from doing and the tactical to creating the right processes and space where the doing can happen productively and can continue to happen productively. And this is something that a lot of tech leaders talk about all the time. There's always the allure, like, of going and doing yourself, especially if you think you can get it done faster. But there's a great expression which is to go fast will go slow, which is if you take the time and create the space for people to learn how to do the thing, that's going to take longer initially, but over time it compounds and the team around you get quicker and quicker at doing the thing. And imposter syndrome plays a part here. There are times where you're trying to be hands off and you think suddenly think to yourself, I'm now too hands off. Maybe I don't understand what's actually being developed anymore. And then you have to try and take a step back in without making the team feel like you're controlling or trying to step in and change things. So a constant push and pull. It's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. I've got a quote from Steve Jobs here. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team. How true has that been in your experience in development?
Yeah, absolutely true. Even if I think about the sort of smallest teams that I've been on, it was still a team. So the smallest teams were something like 3 or 4 people. And if I really think about what was going on there, you couldn't have reduced that down without impacting. It's tempting to just talk about the productivity, but it's not just the productivity that would have went down, it's the quality of the thing would have went down. There are just, this plays into diversity in possibly a non-intuitive way, in the diversity of thinking, like on that team. You do need people that are going to think in slightly different ways and understand things slightly differently to you. So the quality of the output of a team, purely because of their life experiences and their skill sets, over a longer period of time will generally be higher than just if one person did it.
Yeah. What steps have you taken or do you take then to keep a happy, healthy sort of team culture?
Yes. So psychological safety, it's a word that everybody loves to talk about. It's quite fashionable to talk about psychological safety now. Incredibly difficult to do, though. Really, really important to try and do it, though. So, I mean, to me, psychological safety is effectively, can people like bring a large part of themselves to work and not be afraid to do that. If people are masking too much or holding too much back, like in the workplace, like that's where there's a problem. It's a two-sided problem as well. On one side, you're not going to be getting all of these potentially great ideas and challenges, which you do want to invite in. The other side is that you could develop resentment on the other side of the fence, not even consciously, subconsciously. It can happen that if a person is masking, just over time, they feel that they're not being true to themselves, like or their own values. So they may not even understand why it's happening, but it can lead to burnout. It can lead to people not wanting to be part of your team. So yeah, making sure that people feel like they can just be themselves and that they can speak openly about problems. I mean, litmus test number one is, like, do the people on your team feel like they can say it out loud when something isn't working? As a tech leader, it can be, how do I say this? I think people in tech and who work as developers, I mean, we just talked about how mathematics connects to this. It's a very logical way of thinking. And a large part of developing software is being correct. So the functions that you write, the software that you write, you can have one character type wrong and the whole thing can collapse. So there's this eye of Sauron from the leaders, the entire company on this thing that the quality is super high. So what that breeds is just this, we have to be right, we have to be right, we have to be right kind of mentality. But the interesting thing about that is that you can't always be right. And this is where the idea of like agile software development, that you iterate like towards correctness instead, comes from. So how does that play into psychological safety? Well, when you are your team members are raising things that might be wrong, you've had bred into this you must be correct like type mentality, and so to hear that, it can sting. Like when people are challenging you, it can really sting. But going back to the Steve Jobs quote, teams that work together and raise issues, like if you're curious about that and you think through, well, wait a minute, like does this person actually have a point here? Could their objection lead to an improved way of working? That's just so important. And if you manage to do that, it will increase the team's confidence over time that they're going to get listened to, which is what happened to me. You asked about what was my first experience of, where were people going to listen to me? That's what someone gave to me. And so it's really important that I try and give that to other people as well.
Yeah, because I guess in that moment you felt safe and confident, even if it was subconsciously. You just felt like, I can talk in this meeting, I can say how I feel. I feel like I've got the confidence that I've got the most knowledge in this area at this time. So yeah, I think it's like you said, create an environment like that, and it's great that you've had that personal experience of it as well.
Yeah.
Have you seen examples, or have you seen any companies that maybe are doing it wrong when it comes to psychological safety, or do you have any ideas in terms of how companies can bring more of this into their organisations?
Yeah, I think that it's hard for me to comment on the tech sector in general with this, other than what I just said about you kind of have it bred into you that there's this correctness thing. So I think what that leads to is quite counterintuitive, in that you have a lot of people that are kind of psychologically formed to initially be quite brittle to like having their ideas challenged, but because agile software development is about iterating towards like correctness and iterating towards like an improved outcome, I think what it means is that it kind of leads to a lot of people having the same experience of me. Like at first it feels difficult and it feels sharp and it feels brittle, but because agile software development and iterating towards solutions, it is like, I believe, is the status quo in good companies. What it leads to is just putting those people like through that experience where most people over time begin to learn that no, like we have to like have a culture of criticism. Like criticism can sound like a dirty word, but like being like positively critical like of each other's work, I do think that is like the normal journey for people like in tech. Now we've all had like bad experiences on teams, like with bosses, with colleagues, where we've not felt safe, and that does happen. Like in tech, it happens a lot. But yeah, in general, I think that because we've got to get to that correctness and iterate towards it, I think it leads to an industry that is quite good at psychological safety, or teams tend to start to arrive at something or even feel the need for it. They at least feel the tangible need for it. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about diversity in teams earlier. One of the things that I really like about Marra is the ethos of getting more females into tech and getting more people from underprivileged backgrounds into tech as well. How has all that experience been for you, and how have you found diversity's helped Marra?
Yeah, it's been a really good experience. It was one of the things that attracted me to Marra when I first heard that the company was being started. You sometimes see the tech for good hashtag. I hadn't realized it in the early part of my career that feeling that you were doing some kind of good, or that there was a big green tick next to the morality box, I didn't realize how important that was to me early on. But then I did have a couple of experiences of working in domains that started to indicate to me that I had a sensitive moral compass on this stuff. And so ever since those experiences, I've been kind of looking for to work in domains and on projects that it feels like they're doing some kind of good in the world. So yeah, initially attracted to Marra for those reasons. It's been really great. I mean, 50% of the leadership team at Marra are women. We have good gender diversity within the team. And as I was saying before, the most important thing for me is not that we're hitting some kind of quota, it's that a diverse team leads to just a higher quality output. So you need those different ways of thinking. You need people that are going to challenge you in different ways on different things. You need people on teams that are going to challenge you in different ways. And yeah, I think one of the ways in which that plays out at Marra is that early on we were bringing in career changes into Marra. We've had people with lots of different backgrounds like come into the company, which has been amazing to see. One of the career changes that we had was a doctor. So she'd worked as a doctor for many years prior and was interested in technology. We brought her into the company, trained her up, and she was a great consultant at Marra. And she moved on to go into Android development. So at Marra, we were generally low code. She wanted to pursue it even more and get into the code aspect of it. Sad to see people go, but it's probably worth considering that as a success story.
Yeah,
that we brought someone in from a different background and they've went off to explore something like that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think it's just providing people with opportunities, and like you said, they then started getting interest into the coding side. What you were saying was pro code earlier.
Sure.
With regards to technology and how fast it's moving, we were discussing prior to the podcast regarding AI tools. And we were talking about how quickly it's developing, how much it's changed even in the last few years.
In the last 3 months.
Yeah, last few months actually. Yeah. Yep. How have you found that? As how do you see the industry moving with that? And yeah, I guess what are your sort of thoughts on AI and can it be good? Can it be challenging?
Yeah.
What are your sort of thoughts on it?
Yep. My personal experience with it has been that it's great. I love working with things like Cloud Code, Codex. Prior to that, I loved working with ChatGPT and Claude Web Chat. I think that the industry is still figuring out if you're actually more productive with it or without it. I've seen these studies where it talks about how people feel more productive, but then when you look at the metrics, they're not more productive, which is extremely interesting. And I'm glad that I read that because it makes me stop and check myself on a few things. I think that, as with all leaps in technology and new developments, you've got to explore it. And you've got to figure out, is it making the software development experience better? Is it making the quality of the output better? I think that it's incredibly interesting what it might do to how people learn. There are other studies that show that the people who are benefiting the most and become the most productive are the senior and lead developers, not the juniors. So the juniors are using it, but they don't see the same productivity gains. The theory around this is that the seniors and the leads know how to challenge the AI and the LLM. They know how to stop it and go, oh, wait a minute, this is a strange rabbit hole that we're going down. And if you sort of play that out into the future, there's a real concern there, which is that how do the people that are just starting out develop that muscle? If they are being led down the rabbit holes, that the LLM or the agent is going to take them down. I don't think that many people have an answer to that yet. I feel like part of the answer has something to do with it's the Socratic way of learning, which is questioning, and asking questions. I think that AI and LLMs and agents are incredibly good if you ask good questions and you are continuously skeptical and scrutinize. And I think that was a good attribute to have as a software developer and tech leader anyways, which is, why are we doing this? What are we looking to achieve? Does this make us more productive? Why have you implemented something in that way? Now back to making sure that there's psychological safety and making sure that people don't feel like they're being controlled. There are ways to word those questions to turn them into coaching questions rather than objectives. But those skills are transferable to LLMs and agents, where if you ask the right questions, it actually turns the situation of you being led by something into you're just accelerating your own learning, like, because you're asking the right questions and it's giving you the information. So if you make sure you always understand the decisions that are being made and that you're part of it, then you're good, you're golden. I guess a good way to think of it is that people talk about doom scrolling, like on Instagram and what have you. I saw it written somewhere. Someone described working with an LLM or an agent, you can get into this kind of almost doom scrolling situation with it, where it's feeding you the prompt and the next thing, and you're just kind of typing, yes, that sounds good. You got to make sure you're in the driver's seat at all times.
Yeah. And from what you're saying, I can see similarities in the recruitment industry as well, where I'm in, where if you've got entry-level, junior-level recruiters, and then they're getting introduced to all these AI tools.
Yep.
And like you said, it's sort of building that muscle. Like, they haven't built the resilience muscle. They're thinking, this is all coming quite easy, that I can reach out to thousands of people within minutes. But then how are they dealing with rejection? What if the tools are breaking? They're not, there's some errors with it. What have you done to, what experience have you built up to think of other things and question things and receive challenges? So I can see maybe some similarities with with recruitment with that, because there's a lot of rec tech and AI companies that are spawning in this area as well. But have the juniors, have the entry level people getting into it, have they developed enough skills outside of what AI can help them with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a super interesting topic. The resilience thing that you just mentioned. You're right. In order to have resilience, you need to have some battle scars, and have some war stories, and have gotten things wrong. And working with LLMs and agents, we've seen the horror stories where it just affirms everything that you're doing, which is why it's so important to be skeptical, like continuously questioning like what it's doing and the reasons why decisions are being made.
Yeah. Just come back to yourself and leadership. How would you describe your leadership style, and how do you think that was shaped?
Yeah, so I think that my leadership style is to try and be hands-off with the doing, but try to be hands-on with the what. And I try to catch myself on that. I sometimes get it wrong. But trying to make sure that you're focused on, I think leadership should be something like you are clarifying the goal or the vision, like as clearly as you can, and then allowing the team to do their best work. So allowing them to define the how, like as much as possible. That's really, really difficult to do. Read certain numbers and metrics from marketing. It's something like you've got to have repeated a message 7 times to a person, like before they really take it in. When you're first starting out in tech leadership, you think, I'm going to write a document that explains this and I'm going to send it in a message and that'll be that. Everyone will understand and they'll just stick to it. Nope, you're going to have to say it 7 times in 7 different channels, and you're going to have to keep saying it over and over again, and you're going to end up feeling like a broken record. And that's not to indicate some kind of frustration. That's just to indicate that that is like the main part of leadership, is just to make sure that vision is understood by the entire team. So that's what I try to do. Don't know if I'm successful all the time. I guess the other thing that I attempt to do is to give like airtime, like to make sure that people can feed into like how that's done and change that process for the better. Another thing that I would say that I try to do and comes quite naturally to me is aim for consistency, or aim to be traveling towards consistency at any given time. So I love the expression consistently bad is better than inconsistently good. I have to pause before I say that every time because it's such a complicated sentence. But it's deliberately an inflammatory sentence. So consistently bad, this idea that, what does inconsistently good mean? Inconsistently good means that, maybe it's not defined, and maybe we have a bunch of talented people on the team and they're doing all sorts of great things, but in slightly different ways. And what that means is that when, I'll use the code base as an example, when you're working in one area of code and you move to a different part of the code base and suddenly the pattern has changed. And maybe the pattern is objectively better, like in this other area of code, but the cognitive overhead of switching from this way of working to that way of working, if you extrapolate that out to a team of 5 or 10, that causes chaos, absolute carnage, at times. So if you can have an agreed way of working where everyone looks at it and goes, you know what, there's maybe an objectively better way to do this, but right now, this is what we agree on, and it gets us pretty decent results. That's kind of the situation you want to be in, because removing that cognitive overhead, it removes miscommunication between people. So yeah, leadership style is trying to always be traveling towards what is our shared understanding. Yeah.
So I guess over the years you've interviewed a lot of developers and been involved in interview processes yourself. Mm-hmm. Is there any particular traits or anything that you look for when you're interviewing developers that you look out for to enable them, I guess, to impress you and get the job?
Yeah, I guess curiosity, being curious around why we're making certain decisions, how things work. It comes back to that. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. I was describing it as being skeptical before when working with agents and LLMs, but curiosity is probably a better word. It's why are we doing things in certain ways? And if the lead dev on the team is trying to make a decision, well, curiosity as to why is that potentially a good decision. So that's number one. I guess looking for people that have the ability to transfer ideas from one domain into another domain is really good. I might have a slight bias towards this because I myself am not a specialist, I'm a generalist. So I find moving between technologies relatively easy, but what it does mean is that I don't have that deep knowledge in any particular area. I do think that generally that generalist skill makes for a better developer. And I would say that, not to keep going on about AI, but in a world where teams are in theory going to get smaller because smaller teams can get more done because of the productivity or skill set of AI, that your ability to switch between different tech stacks, different programming languages, different domains, people that can do that, they're going to fly in that world, whereas people who are just specialists in Python, for example, I'm sure they'll still have a place, but they will find themselves working with people that can be as productive as they are in that particular specialism and others. So I think that people who can transfer ideas, that's really, really important.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on tech tests, and what do you think has worked well for you in your experience, and what do you think works well when you're analysing and seeing what developers can do?
Yeah, I think that one of the best experiences I ever had being interviewed was it was a company called Makoto in Newcastle. They're a consultancy, did specialise at the time in mobile development, and it was called TDD ping pong, so that's test-driven development ping pong. So in test-driven development, you write a failing test, then you write an implementation that makes it pass, then you refactor, and then you start that again. In TDD ping pong, you got this imaginary ping pong ball that you're batting backwards and forwards. So I write a failing test, knock the ping pong ball over to you, you make it pass by writing the implementation, you then write a or you might refactor, then you write a failing test and you pass back over to me. And in this interview experience, we did that. And what was so amazing about that to me was that I got to see the interviewer's skills as well. So, and it told me something about the culture. If I can see their skill set and how they think, I can see a little bit about the culture of that team as well. And I remember there were a couple of instances in that interview where I got myself into a tangle and the interviewer helped me get out of it. There was another instance where the interviewer got themselves into a tangle and I managed to get them out of it. And I think that I've just described, it can be tempting to think that because you're doing test-driven development in an interview, that the interview is all about it being extremely technical. Oh, and did they write this, Python function correctly? The point of that interview and what was so great about it was that making a mistake was permitted. Like, that didn't mean the end of the interview, it didn't mean that you'd failed. What was being assessed was what happened when a mistake happened. Like, how did you get yourself out, or did you help the other person out? Did you get defensive? Did you have low resilience? Did you collapse in a pile of sweat and tears and couldn't go on? Or were you able to work together as a pair, like, to get out of it? And it was an amazing interview experience. Absolutely loved it. And I've tried to when I'm doing interviews, I've tried to replicate that in some way, ever since, going forward. I think that it teaches you so much, about the candidate, to see how they're reacting to situations. But yeah, my emphasis here is that it is not that they need to do it in a particular way. It's what happens when mistakes happen. The final thing to say about that is that the load that puts on the interviewer is extremely high. The interviewer has to have the resilience and ability to get it wrong in front of somebody and be okay with that.
Right.
When you are the interviewer, it can often feel like you back to this feeling of needing things to be correct. It can often feel like you've got to be the one that knows more than they do. You've got to get it correct. You can't be seen to be making mistakes in front of them. And I think this links in with the psychological safety as well. If you can run an interview like that, where you make a mistake, the other person helps you out of it, and vice versa, the experience of that candidate is going to be, oh my God, they have such a great culture over there. They've just been vulnerable in front of me in an interview. I want to work for that team. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier about the ex-doctor who came in, she career changed, and she's progressed to working as a Android developer now. One of the questions I like to ask is have you seen examples of somebody who has progressed really quickly in their career? So I appreciate that's one example, but is there anything you can talk about when it comes to what sort of traits they're shown, or what helped either that particular individual or anybody else that you've worked with, where when they've started in software, then they've managed to then progress up the career quite quickly? I mean, even yourself, to be in the position you're in I'd say it's still quite a relatively short space of time, is great. So any tips or any examples you can give would be great.
Yeah, not to sound like a broken record, but I think that the curiosity in asking questions, it just means that you're constantly learning and that the learning is compounding. One of my favourite development principles is avoiding programming by coincidence. So programming by coincidence is when you write the function or the piece of software, the new feature in the software, and it works. And what a bad developer does there is they stop and they go, oh, it worked, brilliant, I can move on to my next task. The great developer, the truly great developer, goes, this works, I'm suspicious of why it works. Why does it work? I can't trust this. It can't work first time. I have to go and explore this. I found myself early on, code that worked, I would step through it line by line just as much as code that didn't work. So you are making yourself certain that does not work by coincidence. It works because of the reason that I thought that it would work. And the number of mistakes that you find that you have made in code, not even code, like let's move it away from code bases, in decisions that feel like they're working. They can often be working for reasons that you don't actually realize that they're working. So yeah, that curiosity and healthy skepticism, let's call it, like that's been absolutely key. I also think that I know that grind culture is rightly maligned. Like, we don't want to suggest to people that they should be burning themselves out, but that kind of, maybe grind is wrong, maybe it's back to your word resilience, which is the ability to come up against a hard problem and just keep going. Like in my early days as a software developer, the amount of time spent banging my head against a brick wall because I couldn't get something to work, if I hadn't been resilient and kept going, I wouldn't have learned as much as I had learned. And I'd say that it's an extremely steep learning curve. If you put in that effort and be resilient like early on, and be okay with the fact that you feels like you're not making that much progress, eventually I think that people see like their learning curve just go exponential and explode.
Yeah. How critical do you think that continuous learning is?
Oh, it's super important. I don't think that you can rest on your laurels in like technology and software development. Personally, I don't think that people can rest on their laurels in any domain, in any industry at the moment. I think that the best people in any given domain are the people that continuously want to know more, continuously want to figure out better ways of doing. So yeah, I think that continuous learning is extremely important. I think that especially with what's going on with tools like Claude Code, Codex, that type of thing, I think that it's very important that people are at least playing with that and figuring out, does this actually work for me? Is this actually something that can make the team more productive? I mean, let's play this out and assume that we're all wrong, and Claude Code and AI agents are all a big mistake. This goes back to iterating your way towards like success, like in the best answer. Like, we've got to explore those dead ends. Like, so you in learning that something doesn't work, you've still learned something, and it's not a failure if you can incorporate it into your decision making in the future. So I think it's really important that people explore this stuff, for sure.
Yeah. And is there any like resources or habits or learning paths you'd recommend people to take? I appreciate you've just mentioned there about playing around with this stuff, but is there anything else, any books, any habits you think could be useful to anybody who's either starting off their career or looking to progress in their career?
Yeah. Well, if I go old school first, the Pragmatic Programmer, I think, was an incredible book. Like, when I read it, I haven't read it in a while, so there's maybe some quite outdated stuff in there, but the kind of abstracted ideas, like they were really formative for me. So I'd really recommend that book for anybody. I think that YouTube is just unbelievable like source of information. I've heard people describe it as basically like a free university. It's absolutely incredible. I watch stuff every day. Podcasts are an amazing source of information. Listening to like people discussing new ideas and them figuring things out is just so good for people's learning. I think that finally, the last thing to say on it, which kind of combines what I've been saying about asking good questions, like using the tools, I think that the way that knowledge and knowledge creation works is that you can't just pour information into another person's head and then they understand a thing and can do a thing. Like, that the way that it works is that is through conjecture and correcting errors. So you kind of take a guess at a thing, you try it, and then you error correct. That's how real learning works. And what I think that means for pretty much everybody is that you've got to build, like you've got to have a stab at a thing. If you like run an experiment where you set one dev off, and all they get to do is read documentation for a day. The other person can't read the documentation but can build. Like, the person that can build in that day is going to know so much more by the end of that day, purely because they ran into problems. They know what not to do. So my biggest piece of advice here would be, do not get stuck just listening, watching videos, reading. You must pair it with actually like giving it a go and doing it very quickly as well, and not worrying that you break things.
Yeah, no, I found that myself. So I've been learning quite a lot of AI tools myself in recruitment, and initially I was just watching videos on YouTube and thought, I can do this. This looks quite simple. And then the first time I tried to create something, I was like, I need to go back and watch. But I only figured out I'm only learning by building, and then when something would break, and then I'm like, why did that break? Yes. Going back, fixing it, then understanding it more of, now I know how I've broke that, I won't do that again. So I can definitely see similarities with how developers will develop their skills as well in that area. So just to wrap up then, what's next for you and the business? What are you, I guess, looking to achieve in the near future?
Sure, yeah. So Marra, at the moment, we're extremely interested in all sorts of things that are going on in Microsoft and relating to AI. So I have heavily involved in things like Copilot. There's all sorts of things being announced, like Copilot Tasks, Copilot Co-work, which are like competitors to things like Claude Co-work. Yeah. So we're hard at work at figuring that sort of stuff out, and incorporating it into services that we have around adopting technology. So it's an interesting thing to be getting involved in. A large part of my career has been in building things. What Marra is starting to move into and is extremely capable in is helping companies adopt off-the-shelf things as well, which is slightly different from building. It's making sure that companies and teams can get good ROI on these off-the-shelf tools. We were talking about it before, like the speed that things move at. It really does seem to be the case that teams and organizations do need a bit of a helping hand, like distinguishing between the tools and how to adopt the tools, and how to get like really good value out of the tools. So that's a little bit new for me personally. Really excited to be a part of that. And yeah, just in general, for me personally, I've spent the last 3 months, take a step back, a large part of my career was code and software development in that sense. The last 3 years has been low code. And when tools like Claude Code and Codex have been appearing, for me personally over the last 3 months, I've been deep into that stuff as well. What's extremely interesting is that the way in which the two worlds are colliding. We're seeing Microsoft open up command line tools, MCP tools that enable more interaction through those tools with like the Power Platform and the low code tooling, which means that Claude Code and Codex can be your development pair programmer on low code, which is an extremely interesting pairing. It's something that we're starting to get quite involved in.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm going to take away from this is when you talked about productivity with AI, and is it actually making you more productive or less? Because
yes.
I think you can just go down that rabbit hole and try and automate everything, but is it actually benefiting you, benefiting your business, or is it just a fancy shiny tool that you're just thinking of more problems to solve, rather, and ideas rather than actually solving the problems or solutions that you've got. You're just probably thinking of more problems over time.
This is the thing about being a builder, isn't it? Like you're tempted by the cool new problem.
Yeah. Brilliant. Ryan, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much for making the time to come down, and I've really enjoyed the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thanks for having me on.